Welcome, everyone. We're here at the September Farm to Food Assistance Community Practice Call. Andrew, I just want to thank you for providing some fun music for us to listen to before we start our conversation today, which I'm hoping will be really inspiring to everyone. Let's see, just a couple of things. I'm Jen Dalton, and I'm here from Kitchen Table Consulting with my partner, Miles Gordon. And we are your facilitators today, along with Susan Lightfoot and Andrew Carberry with the Wallace Center and the Food Systems Leadership Network. Andrew, would you please advance a slide? We could talk about our community agreements before. Great. So these are our community agreements. This is how we share this space together. I'm going to read them aloud, but while I'm reading them, I'm just going to invite you to hold one for yourself, for your participation today, and use it as an opportunity to take a moment to arrive here from whatever it is you've been doing. We're all busy. We all have a lot going on. So we're really grateful that you've made time for this today. And in this space, we honor and celebrate our collective wisdom because together we know a lot. We are mindful of our power, our privilege, and how much space we take up. We take responsibility for our impact, regardless of our intent. We give grace to one another and approach conflict with curiosity. We challenge assumptions, respect our differences, and speak from our own experience. We honor confidentiality. Our lessons leave, our stories stay. We take care of our own physical, mental, and emotional needs. And we meet each other where we are. Showing up is enough, and listening is participating. So with that said, we know that many of you are here, and you're busy and you're just here to listen. But we do want to encourage you to turn on your cameras. However, obviously, if you're driving right now or you're not in a place to talk or in the mood to show your face, feel free just to listen. We encourage you to use the chat to engage in conversation, share your thoughts, questions for our speakers, share your enthusiasm or curiosity around things that are being shared by our speakers, or just to connect with one another. This call is being recorded and will be made available and emailed to everyone who registered. We're going to go into breakout groups today. So just remember, if you're ever in a group where you feel uncomfortable, it's not your vibe, or you get in there and there's just like everyone's, just in listening mode and they're like not there, just come back to the main room and we can either have that conversation in the main room or we can send you off to another breakout. And the Food Systems Leadership Network is our community. So we have a discussion board available for you. It's always on the FSLN website. Andrew, would you please share the discussion board in the chat for everyone? It is a really great place to ask questions, to share resources, and to stay connected. The FSLN website also has a resource library, a member directory, and it's a place where we can all connect anytime. This community of practice is here for you and is created by you. So we just encourage everyone to connect there. It's really great. Miles, would you like to share about how today is going to go, our objectives and our agenda for today?
Great. So this month, we're exploring strategies for sustaining the meaningful impacts of USDA's local food purchasing assistance program and our broader farm to food assistance work for the long haul. Given that we're moving into an uncertain and shifting funding landscape around that, we're going to explore how we might leverage the new partnerships and capacity that have been built over the past few years to secure and grow market opportunities for the socially disadvantaged farmers we've worked with as they strive to feed their own communities, and what strategies might we pursue to ensure the long-term impact of the LFPA investment we've been working with. So to meet those objectives, we're going to start by first getting an update from Hannah Quigley from the National Sustainable Agricultural Coalition on the latest LFPA advocacy efforts. And then we're going to hear also about the creative storytelling strategies underway in Oregon from Sarah Cross and the Oregon Food Bank, and learn about opportunities to contribute to LFPA advocacy in the months ahead. Then, as Jen mentioned, we're going to get into some breakout groups so you can all share some of the strategies or questions you have or are enacting to sustain and build the equity-based relationships, value chains, and program objectives in the face of this changing funding environment. And then we're going to have a presentation from a team from Carolina Farm Stewardship Association. It's North Carolina's lead LFPA sub-awardee, and they're going to share how they're diversifying funding strategies and partners to sustain and grow their FarmSHARE program, including state policy advocacy and exploring food as medicine sales channels. So we've got a lot of exciting opportunities for you to share, as well as hear some great examples. But to kick it off, I'm going to turn it over to Hannah Bigley from NSAC and Sarah Cross from the Oregon Food Bank to get us up to date and give us some actions we can take to advocate for the kind of work that we've been doing and its continuation.
All right, thank you all very much. Let's see, I'm gonna tee up my quick slides. Hopefully the slides, are just like ongoing, improving every time that I come back with you all. I copied a template from my colleague who is much better at this than I am. But if we haven't met before, my name is Hannah Quigley. I'm a policy specialist with the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, and I cover policy areas in local and regional foods pretty broadly. So that's inclusive of nutrition, food access, urban agriculture, and rural development programs. And yes, as Miles shared with you, I am here today just to give you an update, as I usually do, on where things are and where we're going as far as strategies that you can take in partnership with the National Sustainable Ag Coalition, which the Wallace Center is a member of our coalition. So we just appreciate that ongoing partnership. So where we are right now, so as you know, and we've probably talked about before, the Farm Bill is overdue. However, things are not falling apart and programs have been offered as normal because we passed a continuing resolution. So basically we are operating still under the 2018 Farm Bill. But that continuation is coming to a soon expiration date as well at the end of September. But also our government funding expires at the end of the month as well. So the current congressional focus is very much squarely focused on funding the government. And then the Farm Bill and the focus around the Farm Bill and what we're going to do, whether we're passing a new Farm Bill this year or we're going to have another continuation, that will have to come, sometime in October. The good news for us in this virtual space and many of our farmers and folks that we care a lot about is that we won't see a lot of impact unless we reach the end of December. So, we won't even notice that the Farm Bill expires at the end of the month. It's really after the end of the calendar year that things will start to fall apart without some sort of a reauthorization or a continuing resolution. And if any of that felt really wonky, I promise I can give an easy explainer in the chat so that we don't take up too much time of that. This is really just to lay the context to the fact that there are pressing priorities. We might be squarely focused on, a Farm Bill this year and the local food purchase assistance program, among other things, but there is a lot going on. But there are, still, we might have a continuation of the 2018 Farm Bill, or after the election, in a short congressional period at the end of the year after the election, there is still a chance that the House and the Senate could come together and pass a Farm Bill. So with all of that in mind, at NSAC and among our membership, we are operating under a strategy that is both a congressional strategy and an administrative strategy. And so I've shared previously here in Action Opportunities, our congressional strategy, which still applies, is just, generally building awareness and general support for the local food purchase assistance program across all elected officials. So they don't have to be on the Agriculture Committee. They can be, anyone that's your elected official from your district or your senator, and basically just to tell the story of how the program works in your community and why it's important to your community. And then administratively, we're asking USDA, plain and simple, for more funding. So I'll go into those a little bit more here. So I have shared this before. We've shared a template, and I'll drop all of these links back in the chat today in the call. But again, there's a template that you can copy and paste just to reach out to your elected official to tell them about LFPA. You can consider submitting stories about the program in local news outlets. You can post on social media and tag your elected official. It can be as easy or as difficult as you want to make it. And then administratively, this is our newest action, and Susan had shared this out in the reminder email for the call today. I think I posted it on the discussion board as well. But basically, we are organizing a letter to Secretary Vilsack himself to ask him to continue to fund the program, because basically we don't have a farm bill yet, so we don't have a pathway in order to try to sustain and create a permanent program congressionally. So we're asking the secretary to help us out, fund it in the meantime until we get a farm bill. The House and the Senate are also sending these letters. So some of your elected officials have signed a letter and sent it to the secretary himself to ask him, to again extend the funding. That House letter was delivered earlier this week with 48 signatures on it, and the Senate one has not yet started, but it soon will be sent. And I'll be sure to keep folks updated along the way as well. Our stakeholder letter does close tomorrow. So if you haven't already signed, be sure to sign your organization up. But I think a lot of folks from this call have already signed, and I appreciate that. And we are actually haven't scrubbed the data yet, but we're over 500 signatures now. So since I made these slides a couple of days ago, so that's really great, and it'll show the impact that the program is having in the ground, and it demonstrates how many folks are impacted by this. I am going to turn it over to, I feel like a new colleague, a new partner in this work, Sarah Cross, who we connected because of this call more than a month ago now. And Sarah reached out to ask for some help on a strategy for them to be able to do some of this storytelling and communicating with their elected officials, and kind of get creative in how they could do that. So I'll let Sarah share a bit more about their approach.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. And I have to just start with, well, first, I'm Sarah Cross. I'm from the Oregon Food Bank, and I'm the Producer Support Funds Program Manager. And I'm just now dipping my toe into the policy advocacy world. And I want to thank Wallace Center for even hosting all of the times you've shown up, Hannah, to even make it a little bit digestible, because I don't know, I'm sure some of you are steeped in it already, but for people who, like myself, who are working with a nonprofit, it seems very scary to even broach the policy conversation, because it feels like there's lots of things you can't do, things you can't say. And Hannah made it very easy for me to reach out and ask for access to the knowledge that I'm about to, I guess, impart. But let me just back up 1 second. I run the LFPA program for Oregon. And with that, I have direct access to 55 producers, 5 community organizations that have direct access to their producers that they work with, 10 food hubs that then have direct access to the producers that they work with. Plus, we are a 21 regional food bank state, then have access to their communities. So I just wanted to kind of show the ripple out effect. And when Hannah graciously enough gave me some of her time to talk about what the next steps were, what was relevant with the timing of things, she and her team gave me access to a translated version, because I have some producers that only speak Spanish. So I wanted to reach all of my producers. We had talked about advocating not only on a state level, but the national level. So on the state level, because of Oregon Food Bank being such a large organization, we were going to be collecting stories from our producers as to what the impacts were of their LFPA program and what would it mean if the funding went away. And so we are collecting those currently right now, and then Oregon Food Bank will package them up. And then because our advocacy team has direct relationships with the representatives in our state, it'll mean more, it'll have more weight if it comes from us directly with a full packet of all the impact that has been shared around the state. So I've been sending out the links that Hannah just mentioned, the toolkit, the Instagram post, the link that will be due tomorrow for Vilsack, and sharing that with my producers. And because I had to tell them, hey, there's one more year of funding and then we don't know what's happening after that. But if you'd like to get involved and help us advocate for these types of funds, here are the ways to do it. And it's through all of the direct connections and the communications that I've now had for the past couple of years that allow me to reach out sometimes multiple times in a season when it's the height of the season in Oregon, and update them with different links they can share. And I know most of the producers that I've reached out to share back with me that they've signed it, they've shared it, that they want to do more, they want to do more sharing. How can they share it? Who can they share it with? And so it just speaks to the investment of one, because one doesn't mean one means their family, their community, and everyone that they work with. And it's just another reason, as we all know, to invest in local communities. And so again, I just want to thank Hannah and the Wallace Center for making it so accessible, because for the longest time I felt that the actual policy and advocacy space seemed untouchable in terms of the barriers that I put up myself. And yeah, so I just shared some examples. I think the next slide might have examples of 3 of the producers that kind of talked about how they were able to, the way that we also ran our program is that we paid them up front. So it gave them access to funding for infrastructure, to pay their workers during the off season, to just give them peace of mind, and an ability to know that they're being paid for food that is going to communities impacted by hunger who probably couldn't typically afford the prices they would want to sell at. And it speaks volumes. And so if anything I can do from the platform of Oregon Food Bank to help elevate their voices be heard, feels like a lot of power and something that I have to step into more. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And I know I see in the chat that Michelle from Appalachia, Ohio, also, just share it's these stories that we want to share of the impacts. It's one thing for people sitting in Washington working on these bills, but when they know the impact it's having for their constituents and the people in their community, it makes a difference. So we have some time, about 5 minutes or so, for people have questions for either Hannah or Sarah about what they can be doing now. And we'd love to also hear from you if you've got a strategy you've been doing and advocating either at your local level or regional, state, or the federal level to share the stories and the impact of this work to keep it going. So if you've got something you'd like to share, a question, go ahead. And I know Jen's got a question right off the bat.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to thank Sarah for sharing that, because I know that especially as someone who's, working in the nonprofit space, A, it's confusing about what you're allowed to advocate for. B, you did such a great job, I'm sure, of sharing these stories that I was able to skim through them, and they just seemed so impactful with your legislators. So I have one question for you about, did you get any response from anyone, and what was it? And then I have a question for Hannah, which is, I've read, I heard you say there's like these options for the Farm Bill, but obviously who wants to deal with the Farm Bill in an election year, like right before the election, et cetera. But what is the appetite for trying to get something done before the end of the year? Is there any, do you know, what's your prediction, I guess, based on the choices? So those are my 2 questions.
I'll answer first since you asked me. In talking with Hannah about the timeline, because that's a whole other thing too, of when is it actually relevant to get these in? And as one of Hannah's slides mentioned, October, and what we're sort of looking towards is the election. And so getting these in sooner, the better. I'm probably going to be collecting stories till the end of the month, and then working with my advocacy team will help me do the final pack in for all the packaging, whatever, the whole packet. But because our advocacy team is focused on SNAP and Food for All Oregonians, I have to sort of advocate that these are also important because they're all relevant and they all sort of like feel, the weight feels similar in terms of what's important. And so even advocating for these in the organization is part of the process of like, why is it important and how it fits in. So to be determined on what comes next, but I will definitely share out.
And do you want me to, Miles, quickly try to
Yeah,
answer the
please.
kind
Yeah.
of
Oh, wait, yeah, go ahead.
the political forecasting? We are operating, it is largely a result of what happens in the election in November that will generate either the appetite to get it done this year or not. So again, a little like kind of weedy maybe for some folks, but the current chairwoman, Senator Debbie Stabenow, who is a great champion of all of the things that we care about, she's retiring this season, like this congressional session. And so it is in her best interest and her legacy, and you know, all the hard work that they've already done and her team has already done to get a farm bill done this year. Particularly if the Senate does flip control and it goes to Republican control in the next congressional session, the Senate would have to start over basically with a farm bill. So it's in like best interest of the current leadership in order to get it done this year. And there might be some extra pressure to do so depending on election results in November.
Okay, great. Anybody else have any kind of questions about roles they can do or things that have been shared by Hannah or Sarah, or a quick story they want to share about what they're doing to advocate? Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Hannah, one, for all the work you're doing. And I know a lot of you out there are doing the work, even if you're not sharing yet. Thank you for signing on. Thanks for working with your people to get these stories and share them. As you've all experienced, I'm sure, the incredible impact of this work. We want to be able to sustain it, which is our theme today. So what we're about to do is, before we hear from our Carolina presenters, we wanted to give you all a chance to talk a bit amongst yourselves in some smaller groups to share either one, well, in terms of sustaining funding, like either what are you doing, what's coming up for you, what kind of plans do you have? Are you leveraging some of the new partnerships and capacity that you built over the past few years to start to secure and grow market opportunities for your socially disadvantaged farmers? There's kind of an opportunity for you to say, what are you doing to sustain these efforts and these impacts? Or what kind of are you thinking about doing, and have a little time to do that. So we're going to break into about groups of 5 people.
All right, that should be everybody, Miles.
Great. Okay, welcome back. I hope that was enough time. It's always never enough sometimes, and sometimes just enough. But what we'd like to do is take a few minutes, not only for you maybe to reflect on and share back something you heard that either was inspiring, a success, something that resonated with you for your own self, or so some of the other groups can kind of hear some of the successes. So you can either feel free if there is something that like, oh, in my group, so-and-so is doing great work, or I was really inspired, or this really resonated. If you want to put that in chat, great. Or if you want to just raise your hand or speak out, we'd love to hear from some of the different groups, because we couldn't all be in all the groups, about some of the things people are doing. Somebody says, Hillary, share. You've been called out, Hillary. Want to share?
Well, we had 2 folks from Colorado in our group, and then I'm from Illinois, and it was just awesome to hear. We made such a connection on an unrelated issue, actually. But we were talking about what they're doing there with CSA boxes for WIC families and older adults, and securing some other outside funding to continue that, even though it's been funded by LFPA currently. And we all kind of made a connection when it comes to nutrition information for TFAP foods. So a little bit outside the scope of this call, but we were connecting some challenges that they've been having in Colorado with being able to do the nutrition analysis for all of their foods coming into their food bank. And I know some folks in DC working on a policy solution to require USDA to actually post all of the nutrition facts for TFAP foods before you order them. So making some connections there.
Again, in the chat, if there's something you want to put in, maybe is there time for one other person that wants to share something they were inspired about or heard, and then we'll have some more discussion and share time at the end also. But is there something else that somebody was really inspired to hear?
So, hi, let me get this.
Yeah, great.
I heard that there's not a food hub, perhaps, in the New Jersey area. No, and not to say that there isn't. Like, and the reason I'm lifting this, I'm sorry, I saw a reaction from the person who mentioned it. I'm not putting you on the spot, and feel free not to speak at all. But I'm mentioning it because it's out, and I hit the wrong button and left the room early, and I wanted to like invite everybody. Let's research it, because for there not to be a food hub in the New Jersey area, to me was interesting. I'm learning how important they are, especially to the most underserved in terms of food access. And I'm very curious, and I would even add my information to help to look at that situation over there to see how we can resource the community, because if there isn't one, or if it isn't well known, I think it would be a good use of group effort. And again, I'm so serious about it because it's really an important part of a food system, ecosystem. Like, connectedness is kind of one of the central pieces that could be very helpful in a spoke kind of concept. So I thought it was interesting, and I love a challenge.
Great. Well, I see already people are dropping a couple of resources to check. If people do know things, feel free to put those in the chat for Ahmed. That would be great.
Yes, and I can add that we are a partner with the Common Market, a wonderful partner of ours. So they're based across the river, but they are a partner.
Great. All right. So check them out, Ahmed. They're out there. What I'd like to do for the sake of time, because I want to make sure we can really dive into some of the exciting work that's happening in the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association, is turn it over to Jen to introduce our presenters and to let you know that after their presentation, one, we're going to have time for some Q&A of the work they're doing, because it's some very inspiring work, but two, there'll also be time to share some more of the resources you have, because really that's what this community of practice is. We want to share those resources. Use the chat now, use the discussion board on the FSLN website too. But Jen, you want to go ahead and introduce our folks?
Yeah, sure. So, it takes a village, right? So we're all in this together. And I just want to also shout out to everyone who's presented over the course of this farm to food assistance community of practice. It's just, this is why we're here. We're really grateful for everyone. But in particular today, we're just a shout out to the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association. They've been operating a farm to food assistance program for multiple years. You're probably already familiar with them. They have a very well-known model and a creative strategy as a network of food hubs, and are really involved in policy around farm to food assistance. And I'm going to let them tell you their story, but I'd like to introduce Lenwood Edwards, the CFSA FarmSHARE coordinator, Matt Nice, I said it right, I think, the CFSA policy director, and Alicia Brock, their North Carolina policy specialist. They're going to present for about 20 minutes, and then, as Miles said, we'll have some time for Q&A. Take it away. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen. Yeah, again, I'm Linwood Edwards. I'm the FarmSHARE coordinator with CFSA. And I've got Matt here and Alicia with me, and they'll jump on when I'm finished with my presentation. They're going to get into the heavy hitter policy stuff. But we've got a presentation today. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So I'm just going to go over what FarmSHARE is. So FarmSHARE is our local food system model, currently funded by LFPA, which we're here gathered today to talk about. So basically, just to break down the way it works for us, CFSA, we receive funding. through LFPA, and we fund. We've got about, I think to date 18 food hubs throughout the state that we support and fund, which buy locally from growers in their area. We've got dairy producers, cattle producers, eggs, honey, all different sorts of products. And they get to purchase these products from growers above wholesale price for wholesale volume. So this is really, really a win-win. It's putting money back into the hands of our growers and farmers. And then the food hubs then create these CSA style boxes, and those are then distributed through our community partner organizations, different churches, religious organizations, just community food-based relief organizations that distribute these boxes to folks experiencing food insecurity for free. So it's at no cost to them. And FarmSHARE is really, it allows businesses to be grown, small jobs to be created, through this kind of work. So here's a map of our current reach. As you can see, in North Carolina, we've got 100 counties. We're just over 3/4 of all the counties that we touch. When I say touch, we've got either a distribution in that county or a farm or grower in that county. We've just added 2 new food hubs, Piedmont Fresh in Thomasville, North Carolina, and Mount Olive Regional Food Hub down in Mount Olive. And we expect to see 2 more counties jumping on once their distributions really get rolling. So next I'll Venmo anybody $100 who can read all of these and recite them. No, but these are all of our community partner organizations, which to date has just hit 200 since the inception of FarmSHARE, which started for us back in 2020. So these are our organizations, our churches, our folks, taking the boxes, distributing them to those in need. Let's see here. Now for some of the impact stuff here. So as you can see, since its inception, we're at almost $7 million that was paid to farms, to our food hubs. 42% of this funding has gone to BIPOC-led food hubs. We're just over 1.4 million pounds of produce, which is incredible. Another impact that's not on here is that, FarmSHARE reduces the miles that food has to travel from farm to consumer. And that just ensures the quality of what is going into these boxes. It's basically like getting a farmer's market box delivered to your door. So this is from 2020 to 2024. This kind of touches on the past year since last May. And one cool thing to note is at the bottom left here, we've calculated our local economic impact using this really nifty calculator that takes into account different economic multipliers. So this is taking into account the food hubs we work with, the money that went directly to farms, and then the folks distributing that. So we're at almost a $6 million, local economic impact just in this past year. Again, we've got 240 some farms over this past year, and we're still seeing new growers come in for this program. Here's a little bit more of a breakdown. Our comms team did a really good job of compiling this data for us, and you can see just different parts of the state, where the majority of sales are going to. So it's kind of a east and west thing right now, with the western Piedmont area and then the eastern part of the state, northeast part of the state. This next slide is just kind of incorporating what each food hub is actually distributing. So all of them have vegetables, all of them have produce. A huge number are distributing eggs. You can see here meat products. So this is it's just really special. You know, it's fresh stuff. It's not just cans. I mean, nothing wrong with cans, but this is, you know, this is really making an impact here. I think I've got, okay, so recently we've done a study with our for our LFPA evaluation. We partnered with App State here and another organization called CEFS here in North Carolina, that we had all of our food hubs who participated gave feedback in this. So you can see that all have been satisfied. And this is, again, going back since 2020 to now. All right, I think I've got a couple more slides here. So this is kind of touching on what will happen if this funding were to go away. We've got a few hubs here. If you look at that far right graph, where FarmSHARE is making up over over half of their sales, which is huge. Some, it's 75% of their sales. So just to kind of drive home the importance of this program and of securing this funding. This next slide, again, is kind of going over some more data, some more impact things. These are just benefits that we've been able to measure through this evaluation, through this data. I won't read them all off, but one thing that FarmSHARE is committed to is serving historically underserved farmers. So 75% of our funds have been paid to small and mid-sized farms. 43% has gone to women owner-led farms, and 30 has gone to BIPOC farms. And this is just from one of our members, just kind of, again, reiterating what we're talking about here today, the importance of this program. So thank y'all for letting me share, and I'll turn it over to you, Matt.
All right, thanks, Linwood. Do you mind, since you're screen sharing, can you hoop it over to the next slide real quick? Awesome, thank you. So that was a fantastic overview of FarmSHARE. So we were at a little bit of background on where FarmSHARE came from and how it was funded and how we continue to try to fund it as it relates to LFPA. So FarmSHARE, when it started out, it was in the initial weeks of the COVID lockdowns, and we were trying to figure out a way to address the needs of most of our producers who, again, being small, diversified farmers, were reliant on contracts like farm to table. Well, the restaurants were all closed down. Farm to school. Well, the school districts were all closed down. We had to fight tooth and nail in South Carolina to make sure farmers markets were recognized as essential businesses, not entertainment venues like they tried to. Essentially, if the grocery store was open, then the farmer's market ought to be open. So we created this program initially to make sure that hospitality workers who were either temporarily or permanently laid off were able to have this food connected to them and also provide market access for our producers. It was initially funded through private funding. It was philanthropic foundations, so we're trying to get emergency grants to the community. Then it migrated towards state funding. We were able to secure $2 million of North Carolina budget money to continue FarmSHARE, which then led directly into LFPA. And North Carolina Department of Agriculture, as the official, licensee for LFPA, functioned as the pass-through, and they contracted with us to run the state LFPA program. And the only thing that functionally changed was the money went through the North Carolina Department of Agriculture, and it also supercharged the program. The only downside to that is that as the LFPA money is beginning to sunset and run out, we now have a much, much larger program than we had when we started it. And so we're having to get creative about, it's a bigger impact. It was high risk, high reward. So what we've got here on the screen we've got 3 real targets for community funding to continue the success of LFPA in North Carolina, which means FarmSHARE. And FarmSHARE, again, has enjoyed funding from all 3 of these at various points along its lifespan, and we're trying to continue that. And we're really putting our eggs in all of these baskets. So we're going to start at the federal level. Hannah from INSAC did a tremendous job earlier of kind of breaking down what the stakes are at the federal level with the Farm Bill via there's the Expanding Access to Local Food Act, which essentially creates a permanent LFPA style program. The only issue, as she highlighted with the Farm Bill and putting our eggs in the Farm Bill basket, is many of us, if not all of us, have been advocating for Farm Bill priorities for almost 2 years now. In some cases, more than 2 years. And it looks like we're going to be doing it again next year. So it is a very, very tortuous, long process at the federal level to get funding secured. And the funding cliff we're all looking at is going to happen much, much sooner than any federal relief could show up, even best case scenario. She also highlighted at the federal level kind of a reprioritization within USDA. So rather than having this money kind of fall in USDA's lap, really restructure the programs within USDA to emphasize the importance of continuing LFPA, bringing the success stories from all of these states to the federal agency to show them the importance of being creative with their own agency funding to find a way to continue this. Which brings us to the state level funding. And I'm going to turn it over now to Alicia Bach, who's our North Carolina policy specialist, to talk a little bit about the efforts that we're undertaking in North Carolina to find state buy-in for this program. Alicia?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Linwood. Thanks everybody for being here. I think for the state, what I'm finding is that we are just pushing really hard to make sure that legislators know how important this program is for the local food economy, not just in certain districts in the state, but for all these legislators who have farmers in every district across the state. So we've been pushing for budget requests, AKA we've been asking for $4 million in the 2025 budget. North Carolina has a unique system, at least to me, that they have a 2-year budget cycle where the odd years are when things really get put together. And then on the even year like this year, they really only allow tweaks. So they don't really allow for any new funding requests. So we've been having to be creative. Where we currently are with the budget is it's kind of in not limbo, but it's not really going very far. The House and the Senate are both controlled by one party. However, they're not aligned with how they want to fund the state budget. So instead, we've been focusing on FarmSHARE visits. We've been focusing on bringing legislators this summer to food hubs. Good success, one legislator at a time, looking at how important this program is, meeting with the farmers, meeting with the food hub employees, and meeting with the FarmSHARE faith-based partners at the end who are distributing the food. And stories go a long, long way. Once you have a legislator who's met some people on the ground in their own district, it's really hard to say, oh, it's just a program. It's not. It's a community-based system that is actually helping to create resilient economic food and resilience in the districts. So what we've been saying is that this is an economic market incubator program. It helps to provide food to needy people, but it also helps to provide a market for these small farmers. And, if the funding goes away from a legislative perspective on the federal level, we are in the same boat. We're like, where are we going to get this money? So we're looking at it from all angles. And when we talked about state reprioritization, just like the federal level, sometimes it's a zero-sum game. They say, well, if you're going to give us money for FarmSHARE, then we're going to have to take the money from somewhere else. So how are we going to do that? And we're basically saying, if North Carolina can support this program, you guys are supporting your own people, your own state, and you have a resilient local food economy that's a hedge against major national supply chain disruptions like we saw in the pandemic. I mean, there's so many reasons to say that this is a good idea. So that's kind of what we're doing in the meantime. We're hoping to lay the groundwork for 2025 to get funding from the state. We're asking for $4 million. That's in addition to what Matt was talking about with the federal side. So we're going at it from all angles. And on the local food investment side, we're keeping an eye on NCDA. We're keeping an eye on agricultural funding through the Department of Agriculture. I just saw today that USDA on the federal level just earmarked $121 million for specialty food crops and organic agriculture and equipment infrastructure funding. So, that's another way to look at it. Like, how can we get funding for local food investments for equipment? Things like that. So I'm going to turn it back over to Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Alicia. And then which brings us to our outside of government funding, which is what got FarmSHARE off the ground initially, was private funding. So the downside to looking for funding sources from the federal or the state government, again, is that they're both incredibly slow and you're at the mercy of the state budget process. So local food funding, even if it's included, is such a small percentage of what they're doing at the state and federal level that you really are at their mercy. And the time frames that we're all working with for this cliff are a lot more dire than us having to wait there. So what we're also doing is exploring private foundations, community organizations who are looking to invest broadly in ESG work, environmental social governance work, that are looking for community health funding, that are looking to really impact. They want to put their feelers out in the community, but they don't really know how. The beautiful thing about LFPA is these programs have been created for several years now at the state level, and so we're not having to pitch to them the promise of what can be done. We're able to show them hard data and economic numbers of what is currently and has been taking place and showing how they can continue the work, not have to build the work. So the risk isn't as great because we've all got product on the ground that we can demonstrate has a real effect. And again, this can be from private equity, philanthropic foundations, or just some federal grants as well. So we're exploring language to figure out really anything and everything that can provide us that stopgap funding until we can get some type of governmental support reinstated. And Linwood, if you go to the last slide, we got one more here that we want to show you. So to close out, we really want to highlight some of the framing that we've been able to pitch that's been successful for us in these conversations, both private and public funding. So there's really two approaches that we've encountered. The first one that's been the most effective for state and federal, and I should say uppercase state government funding, has been economic development. So whether it's Republicans or Democrats, especially with Republicans, if you're able to have what's the ROI data, if for every dollar invested in this program, how many dollars come out of the community? Show that this program is a force multiplier. It is not a government handout program. Economic development, I used to work at our State Department of Commerce, and economic development, the language of that is really convincing for policymakers. Just a few of the examples here, this is investment in small businesses to succeed, infrastructure, cold storage, new trucks, packing capacity, food safety improvements, which dovetails into expanded market access for small businesses. So a lot of businesses are using the funding associated with this to take risks, make investments, scale up their operations, serve markets they wouldn't be able to otherwise. And that's really convincing for a lot of legislators because, the one critique we hear a lot, especially from representatives and elected officials on the right, is we don't want to be enabling artificial markets. That's the one thing that we've been hearing from hesitation at the state level. And what we've had to do is really illustrate the fact that, this is the economic ROI is so outstanding that it's the sure deal. This isn't the state taking risks. This is us enabling small businesses again. So that's enough. I don't want to beat that point to death on economic development, but one of the tasks that we're really reaching out on and really trying to emphasize for private funding is this new food as medicine approach. So I saw in the chat, I forget who said it already, but they really emphasized the medical community and the community health groups. They have pretty deep pockets, and they're really interested in trying to find ways to support community health initiatives. And food as medicine is a really, really powerful one, again, which just acknowledges the importance of healthy local food access to community health and well-being. The idea being that prevention for illnesses and diseases, that's so much cheaper than treatment. And if we're able to get ahead of the issue, not only are you improving community health outcomes, but you're also still supporting small businesses. And so, we've even got food hubs that are using, Uber Eats to send food to communities. So it's all around just an economic incubator. So these are the two framing approaches that we found that really do open doors for expanded funding. Now, again, it's a long process, but the situation we all find ourselves in with DC and with state governments is so dire that we're really having to pull out all the stops to figure out anything that'll work. So Alicia's been doing amazing work at the State House in North Carolina to lay the foundation for funding next year. INSAC has been incredible partners with federal work. And then we're having to, make these connections at the local level for private funding. And we'll see where we go from here. But again, we're trying to leave no stone unturned. And I think, unless Linwood or Alicia have anything else to add, that is our presentation.
No, I think that's it for me. I'm looking forward to the Q&A. I think we have a lot of questions in the chat.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Alicia. I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you all, Miles.
Well, I think everybody is just sitting there going, great. As you can just see the questions in the chat, and people, if you haven't been reading the chat, some great answers and questions have already happened. It's really great to see not only a pre-LFPA program, how it's kind of built, and then how it ballooned, and just the focus that you all are doing as far as maintaining the program with your producers, with your state, with the feds, with the stories. So I'll stop talking. I want to turn it over because I know there's lots of great questions been coming. Thank you, Sarah Runkle, also from the team, who's been answering a lot of those in the chat. So please open up. We're going to take some time for people to ask some questions. And then afterwards, we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about other things that we can generate here, maybe that we've been inspired to already, or that you didn't have a chance to talk about before, other examples people might be following. And thank you so much for the framing of the advocacy too. I think that's been a big theme today, is how do we frame this effectively? So questions, you can either raise your hand or just unmute and jump in, or if there is a unanswered question in the chat that one of your team from CFSA would like to answer, please go ahead.
Well, and Susan just put into the chat a question about whether or not you all are exploring other farm to institution markets like schools, colleges, et cetera, to connect the network of food hubs to those market channels. So we could start there.
I can answer that question because the local food program that I direct does food safety work and market access with growers, and also supports the food hubs. We have some food hubs that are already connected with those institutional markets, in particular Working Landscapes, which is in the north central eastern part of the state, does minimal processing for schools in North Carolina. We don't have a specific farm to institution initiative, but do connect individual farmers with a lot of wholesale opportunities, not just with their food hubs, but connecting them, for example, to diversity buyer initiatives that some big food purchasers that supply institutions have in the Carolinas, like Cisco. Unfortunately, the school market opportunity is really challenging for a lot of our farmers when it comes to price point, especially compared to what they've been able to receive selling into the FarmSHARE program, because we've told, given the food hubs guidance that they should be paying the farmers fair market value. A lot of these food hubs are paying close to retail to farmers for the food that they're supplying to FarmSHARE. And that is a challenge with the school food procurement.
And just to hop on and second what Sarah just said too, and it might be different in North Carolina, Sarah, so stop me if I'm wrong, but I know in South Carolina down here where we don't have FarmSHARE, but LFPA has been running, another challenge in terms of plugging them into other institution markets is food safety certification and GAP. So most, if not all, school districts that engage in farm to school contracts will require GAP certification among their providers, which, for those that don't know, can be very expensive and time consuming and cost prohibitive for smaller producers to engage in. Whereas with LFPA, each food hub kind of sets their own requirements. Some require GAP, some don't require it, which opens the door for smaller producers that don't have those certifications. So the cost can be an issue in terms of food safety certifications to then shift over from LFPA, where it's kind of nebulous, over to institutional contracts where it almost always is required.
Other questions, comments regarding the Carolina model? work they're doing. Very clear. A lot of great questions were answered in the chat. So
I had one question about the like the overhead of using food hubs. Is anyone across the country found a model where that helps reduce that overhead, so more money is going directly to farmers? Or we were thinking about like a farmer-run food hub or something like that, because I know it's costly, but I was just wondering if anybody had any success with that.
So this is not going to directly answer your question. It's actually going to take it a little bit in the opposite direction. But so we have found that the smaller scale, more localized food hubs that are like mission driven, like a nonprofit one that's working with LFPA in New Jersey, is like a really, really core critical player in that they're able to work with really, really micro farms in cities like Newark that, you know, there are farmers that are producing very small amounts inconsistently, and otherwise those folks would not have been able to participate in LFPA just because of volume and inconsistency, lack of capacity. But because we have, you know, we're working with a very large aggregator distributor, the common market as part of LFPA, but we're also working with a couple of smaller co-ops and food hubs that can, so we're filling like all these different gaps. Like there's no way that some of these really small emerging first year, you know, coming out of the Rutgers Beginner Farmer Program, don't even have land yet, like really emerging producers wouldn't have been able to plug into LFPA the way that it's being run with, like, you know, the food banks needing bigger volumes, unless we have these like nonprofit mission driven food hubs that can work really, like can really be hand in hand working with the smaller growers to bring them into like a mixed produce box or something like that. And so for them, they're not getting enough overhead. Like they're not, like currently they're just getting paid for the food and with like a little bit of markup for like boxes or whatever. And so we're actually seeing in our assessment that like they should have asked for more overhead to cover their staffing costs for logistics and things like that they're using to do a lot of like coaching. And some of these producers are getting, you know, like learning how to scale their business up, learning how to do wash and pack, learning how, you know, so I think that it's really just a matter of like scale, and it's, you know, case by case, I guess, and whether or not the overhead is too much or is actually really going to help benefit the overall goals of the program.
Other questions for our team or related?
I had a question about the actual networking among the food hubs, and which was partially answered in the chat. So thank you for that. I'm wondering how much you're investing, either time or money, in the actual network building of the hubs themselves. So if supply or demand is down in one area, does another hub step in to either fill supply or demand? Are you investing much of your energy in that particular network of the hubs?
So we do communicate with all of the food hubs that participate in FarmSHARE on a regular basis, and they, I think for the most part, know each other. We have a separate LFPP, Food as Medicine grant, that works with a subset of the food hubs that participate in FarmSHARE. And we have quarterly meetings with that group, and I think they interact with each other more. We also have another service provider in North Carolina, Resourceful Communities, which is a project of the Conservation Fund, actually coordinates a state food hub network that meets regularly. But again, that's a subset of the 18 food hubs that we have. I mentioned this in the chat, but we did include funding in our LFPA sub-award with NCDA to help with some of that cross food hub transportation costs if folks wanted to purchase from another food hub. As of now, very few, maybe one food hub has taken advantage of that. I think because we have such a robust network of food hubs across the state, they are typically able to source from farms in their region. And we also have multiple farms that sell to more than one of the food hubs. So the farms themselves are getting their product out kind of across the state to different food hubs in the network. I don't know, Lenwood, if you have anything else to share about the food hub network.
Yeah, I think you covered it, Sarah. I was just going to mention that, yeah, it's available there, but I can really only recall one or two instances where someone's had to utilize that.
Great. Other questions? Well, let me open it up maybe with just people thinking about, like, what are some of the other actions that you're thinking about listening to this or you have been thinking about? And maybe Andrew, you could drop some of these kind of prompts into the chat that just like at the state level, the regional level, the national level, what can we do? What are the some strategies maybe at the organization or community level? We've heard some of those. Thinking of your farm to food assistance as a farm incubator program, how might that impact your funding? There's different approaches that are happening. What needs to be done in collaboration with others that need strategies, that can be supported? And I was just talking about some of this networking, state funding campaign, so what's out there for people? What are they starting to think? Because we're at this community of practice now, and as we're moving into this kind of critical phase of the landscape of our funding shifting, what's coming up? Alicia, you want to share something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, when I was at the NSAC meeting, we had a couple breakout sections, and I was really happy to meet Hannah in person because I'm relatively new to this group. But when we started networking with people, and I had one guy at my table who was from the farm to table or farm to school network. And it kind of made me think, we're all doing this at the state level and we're all trying to figure out our own local regional food systems. But wouldn't it be cool if the big BHAG goal down the road was to have a national network of awesome farm to school, farm to whatever across the country? Like, could we think bigger? And I was kind of inspired, not to say that there's an answer here, but I mean, if we didn't have all these regulatory hurdles in place for GAP for schools and all this other stuff, which I think is important because I'm a food safety advocate, that's my degree. But if there was a way to make it easier, how could we restructure our entire food system for this country to get healthy food to people who need it in a more direct way? I don't know. Just a comment.
Yeah. Others that want to chime in?
Joshua's got his hand up.
Joshua.
Hey, I'm Josh Fowler, Just Roots, Massachusetts. We're a food access organization, a farm, and we've been heavily invested in food as medicine since 2020 through the 1115 waiver. So I think that, we were also LFPA recipients, and it was excellent to have that funding. But as more states move to take on 1115 waiver programs on Medicaid, it's just it is an excellent opportunity for both hubs and food banks to jump in on, because while funding is still a little bit up in the air, it's a relatively nascent program. It's only been around for 5 years now. There's legs, and it's bipartisan, because the healthcare savings, if we can get food boxes, fresh local food to patients that are experiencing food insecurity and have a complex diet-related illness, they're massive. And it is easy to talk to, both our representatives on the left and the right about that. I'm happy to chat more about it at some point. I'll put my my email down in the chat if anybody wants to talk more. But I will say we've been able to grow significantly and network small farms and local food access organizations. And I think what I want to say to this group is, like, get in, let's do it now, because the most important push is to keep these interventions local so that we don't end up with a Walmart to Instacart intervention for food as medicine.
Thanks. And I know we've had a deep conversation with Joshua about their program, and it is a great resource. So if it's something you're interested in, and take him up on his invitation. Chelsea, Get your hand up.
I just had we're just starting to look at the food as medicine RX kind of program in our state. So I'd love to like chat more about that. The only question I had, or if anyone's had this experience, is one of our food boxes is primarily undocumented people. Do you know any, I mean, I'm assuming these social services don't apply to them, or do you have any information around that? Like if they can receive any of that funding?
So right now, the way that it works in Massachusetts, and I'm pretty sure across the board, is someone needs to be Medicaid eligible.
Okay. Yeah, I've kind of figured, but I just wanted to check to see if that. Cool. All right, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Great. Well, and Susan, how about, can I turn it over to you, Susan? I know there's some work that was done in the Learning Lab that would be a great resource to inspire people and kind of get people brainstorming about some other alternatives, and then we can move into closing our day.
Yeah, sure. Thanks everybody for just sharing all your ideas and what you have going on. As probably a lot of you know, we had at the Wallace Center had pulled together the Farm to Food Assistance Learning Lab over this last year. We had 10 teams working in farm to food assistance programs across the country that came together as a cohort, really to like share knowledge with each other and kind of be co-researchers and co-investigators around farm to food assistance. All the learnings that were generated through that cohort are coming out in a report in about a month. So we've been squirreling away working on publications of all that knowledge. So coming soon. But one of the things that we worked on as a group is we crowdsourced kind of a farm to food assistance funding landscape. Now, this is very much just like a brain dump, but it's a very good brain dump. So I encourage you to take a look at this. There's basically in this grid, we identified different kind of funding sources by category. So like public funds, and this is kind of tracks a little bit with what Matt had been sharing previously. Philanthropy, individual donors and corporate sponsors, and then other creative revenue streams. And then we kind of analyzed each one of like, what are the characteristics of this funding stream? What do you need to have in place to get that money? And this is just, a reflection of the experience of 20 plus farm to food assistance practitioners out there. So, take a look at this and see if it might be a helpful resource for you in thinking about the different kinds of funding streams that you might be able to tap into and generate for your farm to food assistance work in your community.
So that's in the chat. If you can't see your chat right now, we'll also drop that into the discussion board for the FSLM Farm to Food Assistance, so you can kind of look at that afterwards. As we kind of move into wrapping up, I really can't thank both the work that is happening for advocacy, and thank you, Hannah and Sarah, for kind of re-inspiring us and getting us motivated to continue this work, and the work that's happening with the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association. Just a fantastic model and just a great way of presenting it, so we can kind of not only get inspired about different ways of thinking about sustaining the work, but also some really great language and framing kind of move forward. So thank you for being a resource and those who shared today. I'm going to turn it back to Susan to just kind of give a little heads up about what's coming up for our final this round of Farm to Food Assistance Community of Practice on our October 17th will be our next meeting time. So Susan, you want to just kind of give us a primer to get people motivated and excited for that?
Yeah. So speaking of funding cycles coming to an end, the Local Food Promotion Program grant that we've had for the last 3 years that helped us support standing up this community of practice and the research and the learning lab that we've been doing, it comes to a close this fall. So I'm sure many of you are kind of in that September 30th close date like we are. So we are kind of coming to the end of the funding that we have to support this community of practice for now. We also really want to know, like, where the people who have been participating in this, like, where do you want to see this go? Do you want this to continue? What might that look like? So next month, which will be the final community of practice session and sort of this round of funding that we have, we want to do a little bit of that kind of reflection and community engagement of like, where do you want to see this go? Is this a useful space for you? How could it continue to be so? How, what kinds of conversations do you want to have here? What kind of collective action might we take as a community of practice? And that would really help us in discerning whether this is something that we as a Wallace Center should be continuing to invest in and seek funding out to continue, or if there's ways that we could just continue to nourish this community sort of outside of this monthly container of a community of practice. So our intention next month, October 17th, is to have that conversation. And also, if the stars align, our farm to food assistance report that is like the culmination of all of this research over the years and the work that Andrew and I and Melanie and Elizabeth and Ellie and so many of us at the Wallace Center have been cultivating over the years. We're hoping that that publication is going to be ready next month. So we'd like to do a little bit of like a soft, friends and family release within this community of practice before it goes live publicly. So hopefully we'll have that ready for you then. So please come and share your reflections. Miles and Jen are going to join us for that conversation, although their official time as facilitators is coming to an end. So I also want to just really thank them for their partnership in facilitating this community practice this year. And to Andy and Eva, who were our partners last year, we've just been able to really engage so many and build new friendships and connections through this community of practice. It's been awesome. So thank you to all of you who've been showing up and contributing and sharing your knowledge. And let's keep that going next month, October 17th. You should have the invite in your calendars. But if not, just let us know. We can help you out with that.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. And hopefully we'll see you next month.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.